So welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm really excited to share with you some of our research that we've been doing in this most exceptional year. It's not just been in the whole, 2020 scape of the world that a lot of things have been happening, but also I think in the Devportal world and in the API world in general, there's been quite some new exciting ideas. It doesn't make up for all the problems out there, but at least it's something better to focus on. Let's say it like that, or at least for me personally. With that, I'd like to start with the three trends. And interestingly enough, once I started looking at these three trends that I thought would be interesting to share with you all, I found out that they represent the three dimensions of our maturity model. So we've been working on a maturity model for developer portals this year. And this was accidentally, I really promise, I swear, we didn't do it on purpose, but they just really nicely mapped into those three different dimensions. So I'll very shortly touch on the maturity model as a guiding line, or like guiding line for the presentation. I won't go into too much in depth because it's for another webinar, but you'll get a glimpse of that also in this presentation. So the three trends that I want to talk about are prose like prose, democratizing developer experience, and developer portal microsites. So as I mentioned, we've worked on this maturity model for developer portals, and the three dimensions that we found to characterize developer portals are operational maturity, which is about how easy is it for people to do their job in your developer portal. So not just for the people that are consuming APIs, but also for the people that are authoring content in your developer portal. Second dimension is developer experience. It's like how easy is it for people to use your APIs, and that's centered around reducing friction and improving trust. And then the third dimension is business alignment. How do you go beyond your developer portal just being, and your APIs just being technology? How do you turn it into actual business application? And how do you also go beyond one-size-fits-all developer portals? So how do you differentiate and specialize your developer portal so that it becomes more valuable for your different audiences? So those are the three dimensions that we found in our maturity model. The first dimension, the operational maturity, is represented in the prose like prose trend that I thought was really interesting and exciting. Basically what it is about is what we've seen, or one of the failure states that we've seen people fall into when they build developer portals, or when teams build developer portals, is that they pick one authoring experience and then they just make everybody follow that authoring experience. What I mean with that, for example, if you have a highly technical developer team, software developers, there's a tendency that they'll just jump straight in, start get some open source software, start building like a static site generator with like a deployment workflow with CI/CD and so on and so on. All really good stuff, but with an authoring experience that's highly specialized, or that's highly geared towards developers, towards very technical authors that would like to use CI/CD and an endpoint to submit APIs or something similar like that. On the contrary, if you're starting from a business perspective, so if your decision makers are deciding how this developer portal is going to be built, you might start with a CMS focused effort, where there's a more focus on making it easier for people to just log in and really quickly iterate on content and use the authoring experience from the CMS to really rapidly iterate on content creation, so that marketing and business folks can tune the message without having to rely on developers. And if you're working with technical writers, they might use something that's already closer to the CI/CD process for developers, but that is focused around structuring content and having like a repository where a few select people know how all the content is structured and how it all fits together, and that then gets deployed into the developer portal. Now, what we've seen talking with a lot of different teams that already had developer portals is that if you're following one of these approaches in isolation, you end up with a suboptimal situation, because you might have a toolchain that's fully focused on developers, or toolchain that's focused on business folks or on technical writers, and all the other audiences they kind of like have to adjust, and that doesn't always go that well. So I was really excited when Tom Johnson reported in an article that he wrote on June 16th, where he reported on a discussion he had with people from, I think it was from Twilio, about their workflow, where they said that they don't do docs like code, which is this idea of treating documentation like you would treat code, with deployment workflows, which with like a CI/CD process for triggering deployments, where you have your structure of your content in your code repository, very similar to what I described that normally technical writers would like to do. But to treat prose like prose, to treat documentation like documentation. And that was really, really interesting, especially because Tom Johnson has been one of the advocates for docs as code. And when he started talking about that, it was like, well, actually, yes, this coincides with this first dimension of our model, where we saw from experience talking with people that you can't just have one authoring experience. Now, I think and that was interesting, and I think it's kind of logical, because you can make a really beautiful, well-designed system. If there's no people to drive that system, to put the content in there, yeah, you won't get very far. And I think that's what sometimes happens, like where we've heard some teams talk about it taking months to be able to publish an API, because they need to talk with a designer, developer, and so on and so on. And it takes just a lot of time before they can publish a new API into their developer portal. And that is because there's only a few people that are able to really submit the content, and there's like a communication chain that needs to be passed through before you can submit. Now, it doesn't mean that you, if you have like an organization where governance is important, that you don't need to follow governance process, but you should think about like, who are the different audiences that will be authoring the content in this portal, and how can we make life easier for them? So is docs as code dead? I don't think so. I think what we've seen, and this is how we've approached it with our developer portal solution, is that you can do all three authoring experiences in a single system. You can have developers, what I call technical authors here, who can use a CI/CD process for deploying new APIs into the developer portal, like submitting the open API spec into the system. You can have business authors using the CMS for creating landing pages, for creating business content, and you can have technical writers who can use some sort of repository-based tool and some other automation to have a structured piece of information that's interwoven and interconnected, that gets deployed as a whole into the system. So what we've had so far in our product were authoring, like the first two, the experience for developers and for business authors. And we are now for a customer working on the third authoring experience for technical writers that can also allow you to publish all three forms of content in a single system through different publishing workflows. And I think this comes down to the enter pattern that we've talked about in the past, is that you should not build a tyrannical tool chain where your tool dictates how your people need to work. If you need to look at your organization and you need to adjust to the information flows that are already there, because if you don't do so, your system will not be used, or some really clunky, shortcut around the corner will happen that is not really optimal. The next topic is democratizing developer experience. Now, Ken Lane told me that he's not sure if democratizing is the right word because it comes with quite a loaded context, and he's seen several people making this cry and then not always delivering. But still, I think it kind of captures the idea. Is like, how do we make it possible for regular people to use APIs and the API infrastructure, this information highway, as I've been calling it. As I said earlier already, this is about reducing friction for developers or for the people that are using your developer assets, and improving trust, making sure that people that there's no business friction and no developer friction, so that people can find out what they need to find out, trust that they'll be able to afford it, and that you're trustworthy and you're not going to disappear, and then also be able to do the integration or to use the application that they chose to use. Now, the eye-opener for that was the developer portal of KBC. KBC is a Belgian insurance and banking company that's they're not just in Belgium. They're also, I think, in Ireland, Czech Republic, and Hungary. And their focus is, well, they've been doing really interesting things. Like their web application, their mobile application has a bunch of interesting integrations. So they're very innovative. And when we started working with them, they had this. I remember Stefan telling me, "Yeah, but we don't want just APIs on our developer portal. We also want business solutions on our developer portal." So I was like, okay, kind of sounds like what we've been talking about around taking care of your business audiences, not just your developer audience. So it kind of makes sense. But then when they explained what they actually meant with that, it was a whole big eye opener, because this is one of those business solutions that they have on their developer portal. This is a QR code generator that a merchant can use to generate a QR code that they can then use in their shop or in their brochures or their printed materials to trigger either a loan or an insurance like sign up workflow. Why is this exciting? Small business owners, most bicycle shop owners, like at least in Belgium, are maybe like small family businesses. There's very few larger companies, or that I don't think we have any chains in Belgium, maybe one. So small business owners, they don't have the money to pay for a developer to create a custom integration into an application. So what this solution allows small business owners to do is to basically build an automated integration without any coding at all. That will still trigger a certain experience and bring KBC's solutions into their service offering. And I think that's brilliant, because I think that the ultimate best developer experience is when you don't have to do any development at all. Like if you, even for developers, even for software developers that are going to use your technology stack, it's always better to have an SDK than to just have an API. It's even better to have an app that already exists than to have an SDK or an API. So it's this idea that you might want to look for what are people trying to do with your APIs, and then enabling that, making that as easy as possible, as soon as you have sufficient ROI for doing so, because you can gain a bigger market share there. So I think the idea of turning your developer portal into a business solution portal that exposes the different ways that you can integrate with an organization, I think is really exciting. because it turns an API platform from something that's kind of very abstract and very technology oriented into something very practical and actionable that everybody can understand what they can do with it. Katrien van Gijzel from KBC, she's the business innovation manager. She talks, and it's in Dutch. Like I'm Flemish, so we speak Dutch here. But Katrien talks about business developers also being developers, and I thought that was really, really smart and interesting. And I think, yeah, I'm very curious to see how this is going to evolve. And I think that this is probably one of the biggest trends that's happening right now that kind of accompanies the whole low no-code movement that's happening in the cloud space. I think that this is the low no-code answer from corporations that are looking for ways to simplify the experience of the people that are interacting with them. And I think it's this, I feel that I need to be very careful because we need, yes, developers are different, and we should not treat them with contempt. We should not, how to say? So I think that sometimes we're being talked down to. Like sometimes there's certain form of manipulative marketing where we've dumbed down the message so much, and we're trying so hard to convince people to use our product that it becomes manipulative, and that's the kind of messaging that developers really don't like. And I think this has been the heart of this almost exceptionalism that there is around the really powerful developer role today. And I think that this is not healthy. It's not healthy for the developers. It's not healthy for organizations. It's not healthy for the economy. I think that we need to stop thinking of developers as this special breed, the guy or the girl in the dungeon who's been playing D&D all night and who comes to code and like hack and then will do an all-nighter just to build your application. I think that's not a healthy way of thinking about developers. So I think that instead of treating developers like unicorns that will, if you give them enough beer and hackathons, will produce your apps for free. I think that it's better. That instead of overhyping low code and trying to force everybody to become unicorns, like this different kind of breed of people, I think it's better to think about developers as pioneers, the people that go and look for opportunities and ways to interact with a business, and that build these new bridges that are going to make our businesses grow. And like every pioneer, you need to make sure that they have really good gear, so that they're not going to be out there in the cold trying to make something work and they just don't have the tools to make it work. So like if they're going to be out there figuring out these new things, you have to make sure that they're properly staffed and have all the tools they need to be able to do their job. And Mehdi from the API Days community, he said it really well on our podcast. People don't look for APIs, they look for abilities. I think this has been sometimes named affordances, like what is it that you can do with an API? And the fun and really exciting thing about APIs is that often you can discover new affordances, new things, new abilities that you can do with an API. Yeah, like exposing, but once you've explored them, once you've found them, it's really important to properly document them on your developer portal and expose them so that regular people can use them also. And then the value of the API will not be, it's not about how can I do an integration. It is about what can I do with this API? How fast can I do something with this API? And the documentation is a path to that speed up. So the documentation is really, really important, but it should not become an end goal in its own. Just like the APIs should not become the end goal in itself, we should always be looking for ways to simplify and speed up the process. And I'll answer the question after I wrap up this one topic. So I think this what you're seeing here is a no-code solution, no-code business solution. And that will help us to go towards digital proximity from physical proximity. If you want to learn more about this, I'm working on an interface manifesto, which is this concept, but much better developed. Something that you could share with an executive, or at least that's what I want to get to. If you want to get involved with that effort, just let us know, and we'll hook you up into that. Okay, so the question was, that's not a question. So next, Devportal microsites. So I think the third dimension of our maturity model is about business alignment. How do you go beyond technology? How do you make sure that your portal is not just a technology, but is actually something that fulfills a business function? And for this, I'd like to start with this slide that I put together after a discussion I had with Matthias Büscher. Like I did a presentation at Deutsche Bank just before the lockdown for the German developer portal community. And I was talking about like an earlier version of this interface economy idea, that you need different types of developer portals to address different types of business needs, that you can't just create like a flat developer portal and expect it to fulfill all your functions perfectly. And what he said was like, Kristof, it's like a toolbox with these different segments where you have different tools sorted together. And I thought that was just a really brilliant way of explaining it. And yeah, so I think thinking about your developer portal as a toolbox where you're going to have different segments where different parts of your content will be gathered together, I think is a really productive way of thinking about that. And then in really large organizations, probably you're going to have different toolbox for different purposes. So you might even have like a federation of toolboxes that can adapt to different needs, or you might have like local toolboxes for specific markets. You probably still want to have one like big catalog with all your APIs in one place so that you still have discoverability and findability. But what you want to go for is this boutique experience where a person who's trying to achieve a certain job can find all the tools they need in like in a concentrated place, not just have to go look around to find different things. And this brings us to these different types of developer portals that I started thinking about, because if you asked me 2 years ago what kind of dev portals are out there, I would have answered that there's internal developer portals, there's external developer portals, and there's partner portals. That was kind of like the trope that I had back then. But as I started exploring this more and thinking more about it, and especially in combination with the concept of the interface economy, I started realizing that there's a different way of looking at this also. So first one is the API marketplace. And I think the best way to, this is the wrong title, but the best way to think about this is this discoverability and findability developer portal. It's a place where you can find all your APIs of the whole organization. I think DHL's developer portal is an interesting example of that. Like they have got this faceted search on the site that lets you drill down and go through the different domains to find an API that you're looking for. And yeah, so findability and discoverability. Second one is ecosystem dev portals. These are dev portals that are focused on enabling an ecosystem to self-service with digital connections. A good example is Ford's internal developer portal. Like we got a glimpse of what they were building at an event we had at the API the Docs in Chicago. It was a talk done by Darren Shelchucky. And he talked about like how they're looking and thinking about APIs and their API catalog on the inside and all the different metrics that I want to have about them. And it's this idea of creating a self-organizing, adaptive, and resilient place where people can self-organize for connectivity. I'll answer questions after presentation. Third one is platform developer portals. Platform developer portals are portals that are built for a very specific job that's typically very complex, to make that much more simple. So how that works, for example, Nexmo and Stripe, like now it's Nexmo is now Vonage, like they've been acquired by Vonage and they've now changed to the Vonage brand. But if you look at their solution, like Nexmo is very similar to Twilio, for example. What they've done is they've taken a whole bunch of APIs to a whole ecosystem, global ecosystem of service providers, and created an aggregator API that sits in front that simplifies your connection to those different services, so that this really complex job of getting an SMS delivered globally or making a payment globally becomes as simple as integrating with a single API. And this is this idea of a platform, something that simplifies a really complex job. There's not only platforms on the outside, like customer-facing platforms. Platforms could also exist on the inside for companies that want to create a developer platform for their internal developers to become more productive. Like, for example, if you want to create a developer platform for scientists that want to that need to create applications to do some of their calculations based on their experiments. I'm just saying some random example, but then you might want to create a platform for them to simplify that. Yeah, so the idea here is that you want to help with developer marketing to internal and or external communities to get them to know about your platform. Fourth, apps and integrations. These are not APIs, but they're still using APIs. And this is a new, really interesting idea I bumped into this year, is that instead of making this artificial segmentation between the apps and integrations marketplace and the developer portal where you have the APIs, there's another way of organizing this information where you might also display different applications that are like vetted or especially good to fulfill certain business functions together with the API that's designed to fulfill that business function, so that you can build your information architecture for your developer portal around the jobs that people want to do with your developer portal, and then have both APIs, SDKs, all these different interfaces that are less or more constrained, so like the really unconstrained APIs and the highly constrained applications, all under one place in a way that people can find them together. So that when I'm trying to create an automated partnership relationship, that I can find that in one place. So I think that these are like low no-code interfaces. I think that potentially they could also deserve a place on your dev portal. Next is the market edge dev portals. Market edge dev portals, typically you'll see when there's like a regulatory constraints. For example, in banking or insurance, you can see this, that organizations need developer portals in every country, simply because there's certain regulations, local regulations, or certain language requirements or something like that, that make it really hard to put all of that complexity into a single site. Often you also see that organizations or large enterprise companies have divisions and subsidiaries that will be catering to specific markets, that have really specific market knowledge, local market knowledge, that need specific integrations with different providers. And then you might need a separate, like a different dev portal to be able to address that. Another example could be when you want to create like a boutique experience for a specific problem space, where you create a place where you have all the APIs to address a certain problem in one place, and then you can go and market that to the people that have that problem, rather than to make them first associate your brand with their problem and then find their way to your developer portal and then start using your APIs and kind of like figuring this out on their own. You could create a specific landing page for that very specific business case and market that landing page specifically to that audience, and then help them to find the solution that can address their needs at the technical capabilities that they have. So it's this idea of the interface localization, like how can you translate all your interfaces and how can you segment your interfaces into different contexts that will make it easier for people to use them. Last one is procurements. I had this idea that you could have a procurement portal, and then I talked with somebody from Deutsche Bahn at the developer portal meetup in Germany, and he was like, "Yep, we have one," and it was like perfect vindication of the idea. And it's this idea that you can automate your procurement and make it possible for your vendors to connect with you and to submit an API to you in your procurement developer portal that you will then use to automate certain things. And that's it for my slides. I'll have a look at the questions. So now if you want to have a question, just let me know.